Quorum Radio, baby.
You're listening to Quorum Radio on WRMI 5850.
When you went into the Marine Corps, like in 1957?
No, it was 1959.
But tell me about, Larry, listen, tell me about your time in the Marine Corps and how it prepared you for 9/11. And I want to apologize to the audience because this preliminary stuff, I think, kind of helps prepare us for what happened when everything hit the fan at the same time. And everybody was going to you and saying, what the hell do we do now, man? Right? How did the Marines prepare you, Larry? Tell us about the Marine Corps for Larry Wansley.
I grew up in a little small town. I was an excellent student in high school. Those were the years of segregation, didn't have any money, and I wanted to go to college. And I thought, well, what's the best way I can do that? And that is through the military. And if I'm going to go to the military, I'm going to the best, and that's the Marine Corps. So off I went. And the irony, it started from day one, the way that I was a 17-year-old kid, day after I graduated high school.
Oh my God.
And I was on a flight on Great Lakes Airways from St. Louis to San Diego. And I sat next to a young lady who had an infant in her hand, in her arms. And forgive me for this, but it's one of the funniest things because I look back on it and I get a little embarrassed even then because the baby was crying and the flight attendant, there was one lone flight attendant on an old DC-3, and she kept saying, well, do you want me to bring some milk for the baby? And the mother said, no. Well, then finally, the kid was making so much noise, and the flight attendant said, well, she must be hungry. Well, then the lady says, yeah, it's time for a feeding. Well, then she starts to breastfeed the baby right there in front of me. Now, I'm a black man, but I bet I was crimson at the time. My cheeks, I felt this tingling in my cheeks, and I was really embarrassed, and I'm trying to look away, and the baby was just having a good time. I mean, she was really enjoying the meal, and it was one of the most. It was very, very uncomfortable flight, but we arrived in San Diego, and there were a lot of guys that had gathered there. That several that had gathered at the meeting point. Yeah. And we're standing there, and we learn that we're all reporting for military service. And a couple of gray buses pulled up, and a couple of Navy seamen. I don't know what their ranks were at the time, but they were NCOs. And they got out and said, "Okay, all you gentlemen that are going to naval training, please step over here and get on a bus." And that left us that were going to the Marine Corps. And we're standing there and we're waiting for the buses to come up and pick us up. Well, lo and behold, along come the cattle cars. And those were basically semis, but they had a long horse trailer looking type trailer. And out pops a couple of little short loudmouth DIs, and they immediately started ripping us like you wouldn't believe. And it was like a total contrast as to the greeting that the naval guys did. So they put us on the trailer, and off we went. And we arrived at MCRD, and the first thing you saw were the yellow footprints. Never forget the yellow footprints, because you took a spot on the yellow footprints, and from then on, they owned you. But the irony of it was the discipline, the integrity, the character, the focus, all of those things that I was exposed to there have carried with me the rest of my life. So that was the foundation for me. The Marine Corps, there is never a former Marine or ex-Marine or Marine for life, and I identify with that.
That's fantastic. So then, that your first, well, I don't know if it was your first day on the job in Compton. I guess it was, but you were in the police academy at that time. But So your time in the Marine Corps, like it is today, I guess it was about 12 weeks. How long was boot camp in those days, Larry?
I don't know. It was a long time. It was probably, I think it was probably 16, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, right. And at that time, did you guys train on heartbreak, or they have another name for it, Mountain Mother? Did you guys hike up and down that?
Oh,
They
yes.
used during the Crucible.
Right. Yeah. The Crucible came along years later, but it was just by another name. That's all. The
Right.
pain was still the same.
Larry, so tell me, man, were you a squad leader, or did you not aspire to higher supervisory capacities in the Marine Corps? You just wanted to mind your own business, or what?
No, they christened me right away. I don't know why. It was one of those things. I guess the DIs, they were very, very perceptive and what have you. And they went through and they picked out 4 of us, and they christened us squad leaders, put us in charge. Well, that was a very dangerous thing because I'm a 17-year-old kid from a little one-horse town in Missouri, and they gave me all kinds of power. But they taught me well, and I was able to manage it well. But again, as I said before, it was the foundation for whom I became.
Yeah. So you were made like the squad leader, right?
Yes, and the point that I made was the fact that all of a sudden they made me boss.
I'm 17, man.
At 17, and for a short time I was drunk with power, but it didn't last very long. they taught me to manage it very, very well. It was one of those things where I think that the DIs were just very, very perceptive. They just kind of walked through and say, okay, you, and that was it. But the foundation was one that I absolutely cherish, and it made me who I am today.
Right. And so you had to, by the way, I mean, did you get IT? Did they call it incentivized training? When they put you in the sand pit to do push-ups, and did you get that? Did you get hit with that?
There is, Brad, well, you're a youngster, but there was a movie called The DI,
Right.
and it was Jack Webb. Jack Webb starred in the original Dragnet TV.
Oh, yeah, sure. Right.
But it was about the Marine Corps and boot training. And they had to bury a sand flea. One of the recruits killed a sand flea. And I imagine the sand flea was pretty much invisible, but the drill was, okay, you killed this sand flea, now bury it. And they had to dig, this recruit had to dig the grave. They had a ceremony for the sand flea. Now, other things happened to him as a disciplinary measure, but that, for whatever reason, I buried a couple of sand fleas myself, and every one of us in my squad did. I think it was a rite of passage or whatever, because you had to have the sand flea funeral, if you will, and we went through all of that. I do say that
It's funny.
back then we were coming off a tragedy in Paris Island, like maybe about 3 years prior, where
Oh, right. Yeah, a bunch of guys drowned.
right, they drowned, and as a result of that, the Marine Corps lightened up a lot. That's what they told us. Now you're going to be treated, it'll be much less strenuous and so forth. Well, the thing about it, when we were going through all of that, and I kept thinking, well, good grief, this is what they're putting us through. Those guys that went through that years before, back at Paris Island, they really had it tough. And to put it into context, there's a movie called, one of my favorite movies is Full Metal Jacket.
Right.
And it is an absolutely excellent movie, and it depicts Marine Corps boot camp and everything else. Well, outstanding movie, one of my all-time favorites, but Full Metal Jacket compared to what what recruits went through back then. When I went through, Full Metal Jacket was Sesame Street. It was a totally different thing. It was Full Metal Jacket was lightweight compared to that.
Right.
And,
yeah. By the way, yes. And there was hazing. And remember, you told me a story about the German recruit who,
yes,
on his birthday. Tell us that story, Larry. It's an incredible story.
His name, never forget his name. His last name was Sir Heinrich. And he had been a guy that he was grossly overweight. And he had been put back a couple of times. And he joined my platoon when we were maybe in our third week or something like that.
Yeah.
And one of the things that is absolutely forbidden is pokey bait. Obviously, candy, cookies, sweets, things of that nature.
Right.
Well, his mother sent him a German chocolate cake for his birthday. And that night in the drill instructor's hut, we gathered, and which was the routine every evening. We'd gather and hear the latest words of wisdom from the DI and that kind of thing. And there would be a few people abused and what have you. But he had this birthday cake, and he was brought in front of the platoon and ordered to open the package, which he did. And here's this absolutely incredibly luscious looking German chocolate cake. And you've got a platoon of guys sitting there on the deck, drooling. Well, the DI got him up there, and he said, "Okay, it's your birthday, huh?" And there were a few expletives shouted around, but he made him eat that cake, just force it down, eat the cake in front of us, and then had him squeeze into a wall locker, because he was a big guy. Squeeze into the locker and close the door, and then proceeded to beat the sides of it for a long time. And the guy was just a muddled mess. He'd vomited all over himself and everything else. And I thought, this is taking the joke too far. I mean, it really is, the brutality of it, the inhumanity of it, and whatever. But I'll tell you one thing, and that is, all of us that witnessed that episode never thought about candy, cake, cookies, pie, any pokey bait. Well, we thought about it, but we didn't commit any overt acts. I'll put it that way.
And it was probably the first thing you did was, when you got back to your rack, was I'm going to write a letter to Mom. Mom, please don't send any food.
Oh yes, that's right. I mean, we did that. We actually did that. You know, I mean, several guys wrote several letters just in case one got lost or something.
Oh my God,
that was a curse.
Wow. So then you graduated, and then from there you went to, you had a couple different jobs, interesting jobs after the Marine Corps. While you were in the Marine Corps, you were in a very special type of MOS, where you were basically like the king of logistics, or the prince of logistics. You found, missing ball bearings for tanks, and all sorts of things, that vital equipment for vital parts for the war machine, right?
Well, and then the irony of it is that during boot camp, I painted 7 murals. I was a painter and I was a boxer, and the way that came about, and I'll be a good steward of your time, but it's kind of
okay. No, go right ahead, Larry.
Okay.
I'm fine. I'm fine, man.
Well, it was an interesting story in that our first day off, the first time off we had, was on a Sunday, and we were hanging out. I was in the Quonset hut, sitting there on my rack, my bunk, and I had a set of watercolors, and I was sitting there, and I was painting a seascape. Well, the DI came in, and everybody snapped to, and we're standing there at attention, and he just goes down the line, abusing everybody, chewing us out and whatever. But that was normal. Well, he got to the point where he was standing in front of me, and he looked over and he saw the painting that I'd been working on, and he said, "Is that yours? Did you do that?" Sir, yes, sir. And he started ripping me like you would not believe. That the expletives flew like you wouldn't believe. And he let me know. He said, "Are you an artist?" "Oh, sir, yes, sir." Well, I won't go into the detail of it, but he embarrassed me greatly. And then he told me to walk out with him, come with me, and of course, all the other guys in the hut, they were happy to see that I was going to be obviously the duty victim. And he took me out, and we went next door to his office, the Quonset hut next door, and he sat down and he handed me a photograph of the flag raising at Mount Suribachi. And he stands there. He sat there, and I'm standing in front of him, and he said, "Can you paint this?" "Sir, yes, sir."
Wow.
"What are you going to say?" Yes, I can. And it was just a little, 4x6 or whatever photograph. And he said, "Okay, good, you're going to paint that." Well, I'm thinking, okay, it's going to be like a little 8x10 watercolor or something like that. Yeah, I can do that, no problem. Well, he dismissed me. I went back to my crew, and they said, "Well, what happened?" I said, "Well, he wants me to paint a picture." Okay, then we fell out, and after that, probably about an hour later, mysteriously, my platoon had all volunteered to buy painting supplies, and they did. The next day, after we fell out, after chow and in the morning run and everything, when the platoon went off to class or drills for that morning, they locked me in the duty hut because I had an easel that was 6 foot by 7 foot of target cloth, and all the paint supplies that the platoon had volunteered to provide. Okay.
Right.
My orders were to paint the flag raising on Suribachi on the 6 foot by 7 foot target cloth easel. I had never painted anything that big in my life.
Gosh, man.
Okay. So I stood there and I thought, well, okay, I've got to figure this out, because if I don't, I'm going to die. They're going to kill me. So, but I thought about all those things that Mrs. Hinkle, my high school art teacher, had taught me, and I thought, okay, well, I've got to go for it. Did my sketching and everything. Well, my job was to paint that mural, paint that picture on that target cloth. So when the platoon would fall out to go to training, class or whatever, I would be in there and I'd be painting. So it took me a week to do that. They gave it to the battalion commander for his birthday, and it was a big hit. The DIs were praised and so forth. I was relieved that it was over, but what that started, though, was a chain, because after that, everybody
Everybody wanted one.
The base commander, the generals, everybody wanted one. And of course, the DI said, "Hey, we're on to something good, so you're going to be the painter." And
Wow.
what happened after that is, in the evening, they would cram everything that the platoon had learned that day. So I was doing double duty because I was painting during the day, and then at night I'm getting all this other stuff crammed into me, so that I don't miss any of the training or the classes and what have you. But I did 7 of those paintings over the course
Wow.
of boot camp. That and boxing. And as a result, that the irony of it is, switch forward quickly, and
Yeah.
many years later, as an FBI agent, I had to, along with another agent on an investigation, do an interview at San Diego at MCRD.
Yeah.
And in the EM club, down at the very, very end of the room, was one of my paintings. And I made the comment that I did that. And of course, they didn't believe me. And I said, go look over there down in the lower right-hand corner. You'll see, my initials and so forth.
Wow.
And it was one of my paintings. And this is many years later.
Wow.
I was blown away by that, and I contacted the club manager and said, I painted that. I mean, everybody was just really surprised, and it was a happy moment. There were a few beers that were consumed and what have you. But I said, well, I'd like to buy that. I mean, that's something special for me. He said, you got it. You don't have to buy it. We survey this stuff, meaning we change it out, ever so often. He said,
Wow.
we'll set it aside and it'll be yours. Well,
Nice.
being caught up in the FBI world, and that was about the time that I really got into the deep undercover stuff. So time got away from me. And then for some reason, much later, I realized that, wait a minute, they've got my painting down there in San Diego. So I started trying to find it. And by that time, the club had been renovated and everything else. And it was lost until, it was lost. I wrote it off. But the irony of how things keep popping up, years later at the Cowboys, and at that time we were having boot camp in Oxnard, and every time, and then the San Diego Chargers were indeed in San Diego, so every summer we would either go train with them or we would actually play a game at San Diego. And we would take the train from Oxnard down to San Diego. It was a very, very nice break. But we would also do something with the military. And for a couple of years, we trained with the SEALs when we'd go down to San Diego and what have you. And in talking with Coach Garrett at the time, he said, is there something else that we can do? The SEALs, that's great and whatever, but like to mix it up. And I said, I have an idea, and that is, think about this. The SEALs, these are specialists, but these are veterans. These are guys that are already there, and they're competing for a spot in this very, very elite team, this very elite group. These are veterans. The Marine Corps brings in young people, young men, by then there were women also, but the Marine Corps brings in youngsters that are more in line with the age demographic of our young players. Most of our young guys are, 21, 22, thereabouts. I said, they're bringing in these young kids anywhere from 17 to 19 years old. They're closer in age to the young players we have. And if you can envision the hordes of youngsters that they run through the system, they go in green, they run them through the system, and on the other end, out come these absolutely squared away, total Marines, disciplined, tough, focused. And I said, I think it would be a good experience to run our guys through that. The coach liked it. I contacted command at Camp Pendleton. We set it up, and it was absolutely fantastic. The guys loved it. They really did.
How many hours or days did they engage in this training?
Oh no, that was just a one-day deal. We went through a couple of through the combat village and a couple of drills and obstacle courses and things like that, because we had to do that in conjunction with our trip to San Diego. That was a very, very good experience, and we looked forward to doing it more and more. And then the Chargers really kind of screwed it up because they moved to LA. So,
Oh, what a bummer, man. Wow, so much for that, huh?
it was a
great. Hey,
bummer.
Larry,
It was a big
Larry,
hit for all of us.
what was your MOS? What was the number of your MOS?
I was an 0431. That was logistics. I was a contingency planner, and my job was to make sure that every piece of equipment, weapon, wherever, arrived at the right place for the right Marine, and so forth and so on. So I had contingency plans for all types of ships, railroads, trucks, not that much in terms of aircraft because we just simply weren't using that much in aviation at the time.
Right.
But that was my job. I continually planned. So, if an 8-inch self-propelled howitzer showed up at a cook's unit, that meant that there was something wrong.
Somebody's going to do some push-ups, huh?
That's exactly right.
Wow,
But
funny.
that was it.
Wow, interesting. So listen. So Larry, I really want to talk about your time in the FBI, but I really have to maybe leave that for another day. I want to bring you up to speed, the audience. After you left the FBI, you ended up getting offered a job at American Airlines, and on 9/11, 2001, you were in the command center. Where was that? Where were you located on 9/11? Tell us about 9/11, Larry, and how that day began and unfolded.